Hey, it's LSFT here today, and today I'm here to talk about our first road trip on the new NX 450h Plus. Since taking delivery, I have been driving around about 100 kilometers a day at most, and haven't been driving long distances. So, I haven't been using a lot of gasoline. So, over a weekend, my family and I drove from Toronto area to Ottawa to attend the Tulip Festival. It's a great opportunity to break in the engine, get some mileage, and also use up the gasoline that's been in the tank for over 6 weeks. I kept track of the mileage that was used and the gasoline usage over the trip, and I would like to share my experience with you. Throughout the trip, during stops, I took pictures of the trip summary and used that information to compile the information that I'll be showing you right now. And throughout the trip, I've only did one fill up. So I gathered all that information and put it into a spreadsheet. So now it's spreadsheet time again. So what I did was we've actually did about 9 stops throughout the trip. And I captured the information that I started at 1,193 kilometers on the odometer. At the end, when I reached home, it got about 2,035 kilometers. So I've driven about 842 kilometers throughout this trip and captured all the distances between the stops and then also the EV driving ratio. So you can see here up front early that the driving ratio seems to be quite high, and then it will drop a bit, and then also when we look at the short distance rides, the EV ratio definitely is much higher because a lot of that is more local roads than in comparison to highway or like 80 kilometers per hour driving. Also here, it's the number of minutes I've driven. So total, I've driven about 12 hours and 30 minutes throughout the drive. And then this is the computer liters per 100 kilometers consumption. And also, based on that calculation, I've calculated approximate liters used based on the distance driven and the liters per 100 based on the trip computer. So when you look at it, I totaled everything up, and it was 46.95 liters of gasoline used. And based on 842 driven, the liters per 100 consumption is 5.58 liters per 100. So even if I use the full tank, it will roughly be 6.53 liters per 100. And I'll tell you why I would say if I use the full tank. So the full tank is 55 liters. I overall filled up 33.62 liters in my fill-up trip. And at that time, it means that I had 21.373 liters left in my gas tank, and the fuel gauge showed I had 3/8 of a tank, which is roughly 20.625 liters remaining in the tank. So there's definitely some margin of error, and zero point 0.7 liters seems to be quite accurate already. And really, the 3/8 of a tank could be I could be on the higher side of the 3/8 or on the lower side. So these numbers are just really for reference. And then I started off like on the trip with 5/8 of a tank. So with 5/8 of a tank, I'm saying that okay, I still have 62.5% of gasoline afterward, like gasoline in the tank. And then when I filled up, I I had 3/8 of a tank, so it's 37.5%. So over the first stop, I've consumed 25% of the gas. And then I filled up, I have 100%, and then at the end of the trip, I had 2/8 of a tank left. So I've consumed 75%. So which means if I add this all together, I've consumed about 100% of one tank of gasoline. So that's why I said, okay, based on my numbers, I got about 47 liters of gasoline used. Even if I extremely went to the 55 liters, these numbers are quite accurate. And if you look at it, 5.58 liters per 100 is absolutely wonderful for driving this distance. And even if I went to the extreme, 6.53 is still not bad. So a few things I would want to make note of is I actually use 6 minutes of charge mode to gain from 2 kilometers to 5 kilometers of EV range during this ride. And really, I've gained 3 kilometers in 6 minutes, which when you look at it, roughly every 2 minutes, I gain 1 kilometer driving 85 kilometers an hour. Also, one strategy that I used was I used HV mode when I was driving on highways. And then when I reached local roads, I actually switched back to EV mode. And one more thing I wanted to look at was how accurate is the remaining range on the trip computer. So I took two examples of my trip here, and after I filled up my gas tank on the fill up ride, it said that I had 865 kilometers of range. So I've driven about 656 kilometers after I filled up. And at the end of the trip, I had 111 kilometers remaining on the range computer. So based on that, really, when you total the 656 with 111, it equates to 767 kilometers based of driving based on that tank of gas. But then the computer had 865. So that's roughly about 88% of whatever they've guessed on the computer. And again, conditions of the ride and higher consumption will bring this number um, to different numbers. So I took another example, the beginning of the trip. So when I started the drive, it said that I had 445 kilometers left on the range. And then before I filled up, it said that I had 225 remaining. So then when I looked at it, based on the guesstimate and all of that, it said that I had 220 range used. But then in actual driving, I've only used 184.8, let's say 185 kilometers actual driving. So based on that, it's about 84% accurate. So based on these two numbers, it looks like the guesstimate range is about 85 to 90% accurate, or maybe even lower, because depending on how accurate it is. But at least it's about 80% accurate. As the driver of the NX, I did not feel any pains or aches after driving the 12.5-hour drive throughout the 2 days. We did take breaks after 2.5 hours so that we can get freshened up and also feed ourselves. All 5 seats were occupied, and I've asked the family for some feedback. The occupant sitting in the rear middle seat said that the seating comfort was acceptable. She also said that it's best to really sit 4 people rather than 5 because it feels that there's not enough leg room for 5 to accommodate in the back. One sat on the side in the rear seats and said that the comfort of the back and the seats was quite supportive and it was very good. Also made the same feedback saying that setting 3 was a little bit more tough. I'm not surprised getting that feedback because at a small compact SUV class, it's normal to get this type of feedback because I don't feel that it's designed to sit 5 people for an extremely long period of time. Like for a short ride, I don't see that as a problem. And if people are really looking for comfort for 5 people, I think going up to the RX is a better option. When planning out this drive, charging was not even in my mind. The charging infrastructure in Canada is still not mature enough that you can get charges between 64 kilometer range. And when you think of it, if I drive 64 kilometers and have to charge it up for 2.5 hours at the fastest speed, my trip will take forever to get to Ottawa. So that is why that was never in my mind. Like looking at the map of like the Greater Toronto area, you do see that there is 400 and something charging locations. But a lot of these locations are like in dealerships, are in like the city and all that. And it's not always the most convenient. And right now I'm going to drag over and you can see that to drive like between stops, it gets less charging areas. And then if I continue to go up to Ottawa, you can see there is a very large gap with no charging infrastructure available at all. So keep on going until you actually get into the greater Ottawa area is where you see a larger area of charging locations. So if I zoom into Ottawa, you see that there's 222 charging locations. If you really wanted to take advantage of the EV range and really wanted to charge, you would really need to plan out your trip. Because one thing that you'll need to do is look at, okay, your hotel, do they offer charging? And then you can also look for places that you're going to go and see if there is charging available or not. For example, here, if I actually go into, let me find, like you can see that there's an Audi Ottawa having charging capabilities. But then you really need to go and find locations where you can find charging networks close to hotels. And then not all hotels have charging infrastructure. So finding hotels with infrastructure will give you like the capability of charging overnight, or at least charging and being able to find like spend some time there and be able to charge. So where I was going to was the Commissioner's Park, where the Tulip Festival is. So if you look at the whole area, there is one charging infrastructure here, which is this Adobe area, but then it says employees only, which means I won't be able to use it and charge. And then there's one here, which is the TD Stadium Place Stadium, which does offer charging, but then it's so far away, it doesn't make sense to charge. So if I scroll down a little bit, you would see, okay, this is probably a little bit closer, but it's still not really walking distance. So in here, when you look at it, okay, it's paid parking, so meaning you have to pay to park, and then there's 2 stations, and they're not networked, but then you don't know if it's what is the price. Actually, it does say here. So it said it's free to users with the parking permit, and it's maximum of 4 hours. So again, I'm not eligible to use it. The dynamic radar cruise control is a lifesaver. Driving 12.5 hours would have been a lot more stressful if I didn't have this dynamic radar cruise control. It's quite accurate. It actually keeps within the lanes. It keeps within the speeds, and it gives me quite confidence that it can drive by itself. Not really level 5 autonomous, but I would say it does reduce a lot of the pain of doing a long drive. More to come on this. I probably will have a video coming out soon about dynamic radar cruise control. This has been a long video, so let's sum this up. So it's been a 2-day road trip, 842 kilometers driven, full capacity with 5 people, 5.6 liters per 100 kilometers, and 6.5 if you consider a full tank. HV mode was used on highways and or the freeway, and EV mode was used on local roads. And I did not use any EV charging infrastructure. If I did, probably the numbers will be a little bit better. And before I sign off, I'll share a few of the tulip photos that we've taken during our trip. Hopefully this video is useful for you. Remember to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Remember to click on that bell on the alert so that you get notified when new videos are out. I'll see you next time. Cheers.